Okay, so I want to introduce everyone, and then we'll get to the format. We have Robin Adelson, who's the Executive Director of the Children's Book Council, Howard Singer, who's the Chief Operating Officer for Highline Capital, which is a hedge fund here in New York, and Noelle Provencial, who is the Senior Manager of Experiential Marketing and Events for Groupon. And before I go further, did you bring your prop, the show and tell prop? Okay, all right, because we're gonna share something really cool with you guys in a little bit. So what I want to do is give each of you just like 2 minutes to kind of just get everyone up to speed, because this topic is how I pitched a new event to the CEO and pulled it off. And I want you all to just take a minute or two and say, what was the event, who was the target audience, and why did you pitch it, what did you hope to accomplish? And as they talk, we'll have a few pictures from their events that'll cycle, and then I'll go through some questions. So Robin, you go first.
Yay. Again, my name is Robin Adelson. I'm the chief executive. I'm not the chief executive of anything. I'm the executive director of the Children's Book Council, as well as the executive director of the Literacy Foundation, Every Child a Reader. Our event is the Children's Choice Book Awards Gala, which just completed its 5th year, which is interesting because I only came on board to the Children's Book Council and Every Child a Reader 6 years ago. So you can imagine the fast track we were on when I did pitch this event, and the people who didn't know me all that well when I pitched it to them. Our target audience is twofold and really threefold. Our target audience is the children's book publishing industry and related interests. Our second real target audience, consumers, families, particularly children. We are all about trying to get children excited about reading. And our third target audience is beyond publishing. Potential donors, potential funders, sponsors for Every Child a Reader and the programs that Every Child a Reader administers. The point of this event, again, probably violates every single rule of best practices. There was no singular focus to this event in terms of goals. We wanted to promote children's books and reading. We wanted to find a way to promote Children's Book Week, which is the longest running national literacy initiative in the country, and so this event is a highlight of Children's Book Week. We wanted to find a way to get kids energized about reading, so we wanted to create a Children's Book Awards program, which is now the only national program of its kind, where children and teens choose the winners of every award. We wanted to use each program, we wanted to use the Children's Choice Book Awards program and the gala to cross-promote one another as well as promote Children's Book Week. We wanted to get people excited, and we wanted to do something to energize an industry, and from the Children's Book Council side of things, we wanted to do something that would energize our members, because the Children's Book Council at the time was in crisis, was hemorrhaging money and members, and we needed to do something big, and we needed to do it quickly. Hence, the Children's Choice Book Awards Gala. The program underlying it in its first year received 55,000 votes from kids and teens across the country, and by year 5, we were close to 1 million votes, which means close to 1 million kids started hearing about this program and voting for this program and getting excited. Year 5, which was just this past May, we produced a video of the awards, which was then shown in schools across the country. Again, this is one of the highlights of Children's Book Week, and it is getting bigger and better all the time. So glad I pitched it.
Perfect. Howard?
I'm Howard Singer, as Howard introduced me. I am the C.E.O. of a hedge fund, and I had started at this
Actually,
fund.
wait, time out. Hold on, guys in the back. I must have put the slides in the wrong order.
Oh,
so
I'll pass.
We're going to go to Noelle. Ryan, you can stick with where we are. These are the best confidence monitors. They're like gigantic. We can see everything. Good. We're going to go with Noelle of Groupon. My bad, everyone. So just stick with where we are. So we're going to see the camp, because Camp Groupon looks a little different than your investor meeting. So we don't want to mix up the pictures.
That looks like a lot more fun, actually.
Sorry.
Sure. So about a year ago now, in December of last year, we had a new vice president of global sales come to Groupon, and he came to me, and my team were called experiential marketing and events, and we kind of added the experiential marketing piece because we were doing so much more than just events. I mean, anything from sponsorship activations to promo items in the office. But anyway, he came and said, you know, we need to start thinking about events in a different way. We want to own something that Groupon could take to different markets that we can get sponsors for, not just sponsor other events and bring our brand to life. And so we wanted to change our perception that we're not just a daily deal website, that we're about discovering things in the city you live in. We're about supporting local businesses, and then also having a really unique consumer experience. And you could get that if you read the deals. A lot of them are pretty funny. And so the idea was, let's take let's communicate that Groupon can curate your free time. We can like plan your weekend, whether at home or if you're going somewhere. And so we pitched this idea of Camp Groupon, and camp for adults for sure. We wanted to, we would run it as a deal to all of our top markets, but for $749, basically Groupon would plan and execute your entire weekend. So it included 4-star accommodations. It included your choice of activities. We had skydiving, glass blowing, wine tasting, painting classes, a lot of food. 6 meals were included, 2 big events that anchored the weekend. So on Friday night, we did a movie in Wrigley Field. On the field, we showed Blues Brothers, and then Saturday night, a private concert at Navy Pier with Counting Crows, transportation, staff, I mean, everything. And so it was new for us. You know, we're not a travel agency. It was definitely out of the box, but we think it really kind of brought all of those 3 main things together. So let me do it.
Perfect. Okay, so now Howard is up. So tell us about your Investor Day event and what made you decide to pitch it.
Sure. So 7 years ago, I joined this organization, Highline Capital, and I was brought in to run all business aspects of the firm. And the firm, very good asset managers, focused on running a portfolio, not really focused on the business aspects. And that included building out the operations team, the compliance and legal effort, and the marketing and investor service. And this goes to all of you event planners out there, because you never know where your next client may come from. Howard and I are standing on the sideline of our son's soccer game one afternoon. And we start talking, and he tells me about what he had done the last weekend, and the light bulb went off. It was a private equity firm's investor day that they had put on, and it was like, that is the type of thing that we need to do to help take us to the next level. Being in a very small organization, immediately coming in as a relatively senior person, I only had to pitch this to the CEO. It was a great opportunity to help deliver our brand to our investors, to our prospects, to the consulting community that is usually interfacing between us and our investors, as well as to our business partners. So it was fairly easy to sell the concept, although there was a lot of fear initially as to what will it take to pull this off. And we could talk about that.
Yeah, and it's a really good example, because our sons were on a travel soccer team. And for those of you who may have a kid on a travel team, you know, it's a big time commitment. I mean, you're traveling a lot. There's a lot of standing on the sidelines. And this had been Howard's idea. But for those of you that are independent planners or on event companies, this is where events can come from. And this whole panel is about being proactive. And so if he hadn't thought of the idea, I'd like to be able to think that if he said, you know, we're really trying to find a way to, you know, showcase the depth of talent in our firm and make it more professional, I'd like to be able to think that when I heard that, I would have said, you know what, we should talk about doing an event and about being proactive. Before I go further, I want to remind everyone, we are also going to be taking questions from the audience if we can. Chad has the iPad before, and text your questions in from the IML devices, and we'll try to circle back to those in a little bit. So Noelle, I want to talk about how you pitch this, okay, to Groupon. You pitched it to the CEO, and you came up with a very creative tool. And I want you to tell people what it is, and then we'll show it to them, okay?
Sure. So I've heard a lot today about knowing your audience, right? And my audience was Andrew Mason, who's our young and kind of quirky CEO, if you've heard anything about him. And so I knew that while I definitely had to have my financial projections totally buttoned up and contingency plans and all the rest, I needed to get him interested. And I mean, he gets really distracted in meetings sometimes, so I wanted to make it fun. So I brought which is a visual timeline of what, it was an example of what your weekend could be like at Camp Groupon, and so I handed this.
So you keep talking, Howard, you stand up, and we're going to show how long this thing is, okay? So you grab an end of that, and this is what she brought in, okay? And is this the actual one?
This is not, he kept the actual one.
So
I literally
this is like
printed
6
it out.
feet long here. This would get me pretty excited.
It's very
cool.
Right?
A lot of activities.
Yeah.
Thank you for bringing this.
Yeah, sure. I mean, we had it up on the screen too, so we did I got to walk him through what the weekend could be like for an attendee from arrival to departure and everything in between. But he stretched it out and couldn't hold it and got a kick out of it. So it helped just to lighten the mood. And then I asked for a lot of money.
One of the other tactics about getting an event approved is the idea of not just going in cold, but of lining up support beforehand. Robin, can you talk about what you did to do that in advance of pitching your board?
Sure. I had to actually pitch 2 boards because I am pitching on behalf of Children's Book Council as well as Every Child a Reader. I was hired by the 2 organizations that work in tandem together. When I was hired by the chair and by the board of the Children's Book Council, it was on the understanding with the expectation that I would do big things very, very quickly. It really was real life, go big or go home. And I knew that the chair of the board of the Children's Book Council was going to be favorably disposed to anything that sounded big and dramatic and hadn't been done within our industry before. So that was the first person that I went to. I said, this is something we need to be doing. This can hit so many of the different elements of the charge that was put to me upon taking this job, and I think this one event can bring everything together. I also went to the chair of Every Child a Reader that had sort of gradually been put in place during the first year that I was at the Children's Book Council, and brought that person on board. Same thing, Every Child a Reader wanted something big and something dramatic so that people would hear about Children's Book Week. People would know what we're doing, and we could potentially raise money for Every Child a Reader, which is a 501c3 charitable entity. I also went to 1/3 person to line them up. In addition to these big programs and initiatives, in the first year that I was at the Children's Book Council and Every Child a Reader, we created a program with the Library of Congress called the National Ambassador for Young People's Literature, which is essentially the children's book equivalent of a poet laureate. The person that took on that first position, John Sheska, is a wonderful and beloved children's book author who's tremendously charismatic and a huge fan and supporter of everything that the Children's Book Council and Every Child a Reader does. So he was the 3rd person that I brought on board in the planning aspect. With the 3 of them fully supportive, I then was able to go to the 2 boards and say, we have a great idea and this is what we should do. And I should also point out, from my prior life before getting to Children's Book Council, I already knew of Howard's reputation, and Howard was running Paint the Town Red at the time. So I called Howard when we were in the planning phases of this, or I guess before, because you were right there in the planning phases. And I said, this is what I want to do, and gave him the typical nonprofit introduction, which was beer budget, champagne dream, what can we do?
Which we all love.
Which we all love. But we did it. We absolutely did it. And I think that was a part of it. Having Howard on board, having an event planner on board, gave the pitch some legitimacy and a sense that this was going to be something crisp and professional, and we'd be able to do something great. And we did.
So the idea being to not just go into a room blind, to have some people in the room pre-pitched so that when the ideas rolled out, you have some support that you're walking into. Noelle, you talked to me about not just lining up support for the pitch, but lining up support immediately afterwards. Because this is something we may not think about in pitching an event. It's one thing to get it approved, but then you got to get everybody's cooperation to make it happen, right? So tell us about what you did afterwards.
Sure. I mean, in the last I guess when I pitched this a year ago, Groupon was still growing at a crazy pace, and it was weekly. There was a new person in a position running a department that the communication it's there, but it's tough to sometimes know exactly who's running what. So right away, I had a really big interdepartmental meeting and gave all of the heads of the department a lot of responsibility. And if that person wasn't going to be involved for all of our monthly checkpoints, then they needed to assign someone. And if it changed, it was up to them to let us know who would be the new person. And we kicked it off early. And 6 months of planning might not seem like a crazy amount of time to anyone here, but when the company's only 2 years old at the time, and I'm saying 6 months from now we're going to be doing all these things, it's like wild. So I had to really just kind of keep all these different departments in constant communication. And that's tough also when you rely so much on all these other teams, and their goals are very different than our own. And so, their goals are their goals, and they don't necessarily have to play along and help out. But at the end of the day, I mean, everyone believed that this was going to help the company and help grow our brand and differentiate ourselves from the competition. So, yeah, a lot of different people working together.
So it sounds like it was a huge planning process. Howard, when you pitched the idea, I think we kind of had an idea of what the cost might be, but you were there when the event kind of ran through your office like a hurricane. From a time standpoint, to what extent did you guys have an idea on how much time it would take away from your team, and to what extent would you recommend someone pitching an event, tell people about that? Because it might scare them off, but on the flip side, you want to prepare them and be honest.
Yeah, I think we all went into this, and it's really important because this was our big branding exercise, and part of it is branding the integrity and the quality of what we do. So that's the intellectual process, and the only way to show that is the presentation time. And I think we all knew we wanted it to be perfect, which it created that much more time commitment from everyone, and we were wedded to this for months, and probably over the top the first time. It probably got cut by a factor of 30 or 40% the second time we did it, but the first time we really wanted to make this thing go. And I think at the end of the day, people were just exhausted. They were sort of shocked at how much time it took, but they were glad they put the effort in when they saw the result.
Now, what's interesting, and I'm conscious of the time, but I want to get in a couple more questions before we turn to Chad if he's got anything on the tablet. Part of what I like about this panel is the idea of being proactive. And we talk about ROI and proving your value. A lot of people feel it's an exercise in justifying something you're spending money on. But in order to really, really be taken seriously, you have to have a critical eye to it and be prepared to have the event canceled or pulled back or changed if it doesn't meet the company goals. And I don't think that means that you're going to lose your standing. I think that it means that you're going to be taken more seriously as a business partner. And so of the three events, I believe that Robin's is the only one that will probably continue into next year. I'm not sure about Highline's, but I know Howard, you did the event a few times, and then this past year you shifted to a virtual event. Yeah. And so talk about what made you decide to do that, and was it hard because you'd been emotionally vested? It had been sort of your baby?
It wasn't as hard for me that sort of the idea germinated with me, but it was the people who worked with me who sort of took it on. They missed it because they felt like it was their baby that they drove through, and there was some resistance internally. We wanted to do a virtual investor day, or there was a groundswell to do and test out a virtual investor day. It ended up being very successful, but I think we came to the conclusion that there's something about the in-person event. Our investors wanted that. Our investors appreciated the opportunity to sit in front of their computers at their desks also. And it took a lot less time, and it was about 15% the price to get it pulled off. But there were people who really loved driving the investor day, the event for us internally, and they did miss it, and held us back a little bit and probably dragged out the decision-making process a little longer than it needed to go.
Noelle, by every measure, Camp Groupon was a big success. And yet, at the same time, just because it's successful doesn't mean the company is going to continue it. They might be able to do even more success with the Groupon's core business. And so I asked you, do you think they'll do it again? And you said you didn't think so, but it wasn't because the event wasn't successful. Can you just share with the audience for a minute, even though they may not continue it, how did this impact your standing within the company? I can't imagine that you wouldn't have been viewed more impressively even if the event's not continued. What was that like?
Yeah, I'm definitely tied emotionally to this event. It was, I'm still pushing for a version of it to happen again, but things are changing there all the time. We have new products launching and new focuses, and my team kind of gets carried along with that. But I think the exposure that we got to all of the different departments was huge. I mean, at this point, I have more personal relationships with people within the company who are important in their roles, who I might not have had the opportunity to interact with. I think at the end of the day, people seeing the positive press and hearing, reading articles about it and just seeing our recap videos of people loving Groupon and having this really cool offline experience totally reflects well on us. And so I think the next time we have our next idea and we go to them for support up front, I think they'll be more likely to get on board without as many questions and just kind of trust that we can pull something off even if it doesn't sound like we could.
Perfect. Chad, do we have time for a question or two over there? If not, I have another one for Robin I'd like to ask.
I have a comment first, not a question but a comment. Love the book podium at the book council event, so kudos. And the other, this was for Noelle, but I think it kind of applies to everybody. How do you encourage other departments to be involved? Noelle, you talked about just organizing, you needed to, but if they're like, well, this is your thing, not my thing, how do you kind of get their buy-in when maybe it's coming from you as opposed to someone above them?
Yeah. Education. So reading BizBash and reading Ad Age and reading all these things that say, if a person engages with a brand for more than 30 seconds, they're more likely to choose you over the competition next time. And I'm constantly talking to developers and engineers and finance people more than I would ever want to, and they don't read the same things. They don't know. And so I try to start every pitch or presentation with some of those stats that are really compelling, and then calling out, oh, look who else is doing it, and using other companies as examples and what they're spending and what our competition is doing. That really hits home.
And just in 30 seconds or less, because I'm conscious of the time, I totally admire this initiative, but just so you know, it's not like these people are superhuman. Robin, tell us how nervous you are about what you did, because not only were you trying to create a new event, you moved Children's Book Week from November to May, and you kind of, to do this, you have to put yourself a little bit out there. And I think a lot of great things come out of it, but just let everyone know how freaked out you were. Not freaked out, anxious.
I was
nervous.
not freaked out. I walked into a new job and pitched a bunch of people who had no reason to believe I knew what I was talking about, and I knew what I was getting everybody into. And yet I convinced them that Children's Book Week, which had been around for 89 years or 88 years at the time, always in November, should switch to May. And then I convinced them that we should launch this new program to the new Children's Choice Book Awards program, and then a gala as a highlight of this new Children's Book Week. And I think it could have been a lot for them to grasp, but I think at the time that they hired me, they were open-minded and wanted somebody who was going to be innovative, come up with ideas that had not been tried before in our industry, and they were extremely supportive. Having said that, it could have all so easily come crashing down, and that would have probably been the end of my organization, which had started off in crisis mode, and it certainly would have been the end of my job, because if there was no organization, there would be no me. I was nervous about that. I was also pitching an event at a time that the biggest awards program in books, the Quills, was on its way down. It had completely imploded. So I was nervous about that. My boards were certainly nervous about that, and yet I was very enthusiastic about this. I knew that we had a great idea. I knew we had a great program. I knew we had everything we needed. And can I just take 5 seconds about the podium? Great example of what you could do on a very low budget as long as you have a really fantastic event planner. Sequence.
Excellent, excellent. Big hand for our panel. Thank you very much, guys. Thank you.